All right, Wiz. So OpenAI dropped an open AI framework to build agents. They're calling it the Agents SDK, Software Development Kit. Classic naming scheme. Is it the best thing out there for building agents?
It's definitely one of them, Greg. It's definitely one of them. It is it's numbered on the list.
Okay, so it's actually pretty legit. Like last time we looked at OpenAI's agent framework, it was this educational one called Swarm. Now this one seems to be the next generation production improvement. Overall, you're liking what you're seeing.
That's correct.
Okay. And then they also released a number of other API tools that sort of we're gonna cover and sort of give people context for. It's a rapidly evolving thing. The past 2 years has just been a whirlwind of releases from them, but we're really starting to see this maturity of the platforms, of the orchestration frameworks, and that really comes through when we look at the Agents SDK today. We're going to build, I believe, a deep research application, table stakes for the day. And you're going to show us also the new observability and monitoring tools on the back end. All in all, feeling like table stakes. Anything super new you're seeing from this?
So the answer is no. It's neatly packaged. It's from OpenAI. It's very opinionated. It is good to have more people trying to figure out this space because it means we're going to figure it out faster. I don't see a reason why this is like, oh wow, everyone should switch, right? But it's good. Does the thing it says, does it well. What else do you need?
Yeah. I mean, if I was one of these platforms, I was one of these orchestration frameworks, LangChain, Llama Index, I'd be a little bit worried now that the big player's getting in the game. Interesting to see the first big player get in the game. I'm excited to walk through this, learn a little bit more today. We'll chat about each of the aspects that we think are most important along the way. And then, of course, we got the big demo coming at the end. Wiz, ready to get into it?
So ready.
Let's do it. All right.
So ready.
All right. We're talking agents today, and we're talking about this level of production that we're achieving in 2025. Now, throughout the day, we're going to talk about a number of tools. We've had a lot of content on these tools over the past couple of years. Please do check that out if you want to go deeper on any of them, including all the APIs that we'll talk about. If you have questions along the way, please use the Slido link on your viewing platform, or go ahead and, while we're having discussion, throw your questions, comments into the YouTube live chat, and we'll go ahead and see if we can get to them. It should be a pretty chill day today, walking through this new framework and the release from March 11th from OpenAI. So go ahead, buckle up, grab some lunch, and let's go ahead and get into it today. Enterprise agents with OpenAI's Agents SDK, Software Development Kit. This is what we want to cover. And this is kind of the idea of the session, if we want to align ourselves to it, is to really understand not just the Agents SDK, but a little bit of the evolution of the tooling that we talk about when we talk about building agents. And when we talk about building with agentic reasoning, this is perhaps the most interesting piece to me, as we've seen the models evolve as well as the orchestration frameworks. This is a sort of key conceptual piece that I hope we can zoom in on a little bit today. We'll look at the core constructs of the Agents SDK, as well as the way it's kind of evolved since Swarm, and how we can use these new monitoring and observability tools, probably ones that, if you're familiar with other platforms, are going to look quite familiar to you. We'll build, ship, and share a deep research application. I think they call it the Research Bot from OpenAI, and we'll ask it some fun questions to align with the sort of flavor of the day. So we'll sort of introduce the Agents SDK, give you a little brief history of some tooling that sort of led up to this. It's a bottom-up, sort of progression from really 2023 is when we started seeing a lot of these releases come out, bang, 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 after the 2022 ChatGPT release in November. And it's kind of been a steady journey since then. So hopefully that comes together quite nicely today before we get into our build. So the Agents SDK, this is sort of the big meat and potatoes of their most recent release. They said, hey, we got all these enterprise tools, people are using it in production. Now we want to have our own agent orchestration framework that people can totally use just like any other one, plug and play, truly open source. We're taking inspiration from the open source leaders in the space, and we want to really get into it and help simplify this agentic orchestration. And again, it's built on the back of Swarm. We covered Swarm in an event when it recently came out. Swarm is basically being deprecated now that the OpenAI Agents SDK is coming out. And they were very explicit at the time of the release that it was experimental, it was educational. And it's also educational to look at what Swarm was actually made of. Like, there were kind of two core constructs, two primitives when it came to Swarm. There were handoffs and there were routines. And we can sort of define these specifically. Let's start with routines because it's a little more straightforward. A routine is just a list of instructions. It's represented in the system prompt, and it includes the tools. So it's basically a very explicit sort of to-do list of specific steps that we want to take. So we can think of routines as a set of steps. Really, that's kind of all we're talking about here. And this is consistent across other frameworks that we've covered on this channel before, including LlamaIndex explicitly calls out steps, for instance, in their workflows and agent workflows. So it looks something like this. Your customer support for Acme Incorporated, always answer in a sentence or less. Follow the following routine. 1, first ask this. 2, propose a fix. 3, only if. 4, if. And so we can sort of provide some also functions here. And, we see this very simple kind of conditional logic set up with a routine. Okay, fair enough. Then when we get to this handoff thing, this is the piece that was always a bit more ambiguous to me. And I think they've clarified this a bit now with the new evolution. This idea of an agent or a routine is handing off an active conversation to another agent, much like when you get transferred to someone else on a phone call. So the handoff is actually an agent, or it's the agent handing off. It's the routine handing off. Okay, so it's a little bit ambiguous here. It always kind of was. We think about the agent handing off. We think about the routine handing off. It's just not maybe as simple as it could be. And this idea of the handoff, this idea of taking the action of the handoff is basically like, okay, now it's time to make it happen. It's time to take the action. After we've done the reasoning, we've expressed our intent, it's time to actually do the thing. Another way to think about this is once we do the reasoning, then we have to take the action. So we think through what should we be handing off to, and then we take the action. So it's not actually that complicated. It's just maybe a little bit, a little bit too nebulous for the actual level of complexity that it represented. Because typically this is very common in any agent setup. Let's consider a single agent system where we ask a question. The agent's going to go take some sort of action. This is the reasoning and the action. Now we might get an answer right away based on just one action. The actions could consist of a lot of different tools. You could go hit different APIs, hit different endpoints, and retrieve information back. You could basically take that result that you've retrieved. You could say, okay, how should I consider this observation? It gets pumped back into this conversation thread, and then you're sort of having the entire conversation in context. Now, this idea of, again, sort of the handoff itself, if we kind of look at what's happening when we actually do the action, right? We have the set of steps, and then we have sort of the actual doing of the thing. This action piece is actually where the magic is happening. This actually uses a fine-tuned model that's been fine-tuned for function calling. So this idea that we're going to do the reasoning and then do the action or the function call, this kind of happens right here. And it happens kind of at the interface of the agent and the tools. And so we can kind of think about this idea of function calling as combining reasoning and action into one single step. This is useful because when we look at how these tools have evolved from OpenAI, it kind of plays a key role in the story here, this idea of function calling. So if we think about last couple of years from OpenAI and the key tooling that they've released for developers, starting back all the way in March 2023, they released the chat completions API. And this was the idea of a chat style model. What made it chat style is that instead of just giving an input text and an output text, we would have sort of the input be the entire list, the entire conversation so far, the thread of chat messages. And then the output would be a single chat message, often appended to the conversation thread. And there were different roles that, were really important. System, user, assistant. The sort of system level role, interestingly, is now kind of slowly being deprecated by OpenAI, even as of today, in favor of a developer role. That's sort of what they're going to call the new system role. But the idea of the user engaging and the assistant being either the assistant that responds or you acting as the AI, as the human during development, these are all sort of core fundamental. System, user, assistant, got it. And then, just a few months later in 2023, what happened is we saw the function calling API come out. And this was basically a fine-tuned version of ChatGPT or of GPT 3.5 Turbo, where it was fine-tuned literally to both detect when a function needs to be called and then to actually respond with the proper output to be able to call that function. And so it was kind of this important step in the development of subsequent tooling that has led to today. Now, at the same time, they released, this even more general JSON mode. They used to kind of say, hey, just always output in JSON mode. Then they said, well, that's not enough. Let's go ahead and make it a fine-tuned function call. And then just the more general, maybe I don't specifically need to understand the input and then call a function, but I just always want to return a JSON object. So they even started to expand a little bit here to essentially provide developers even a slightly more useful, slightly more expansive, a set of tooling, even outside of function calling and the chat completions API, which, over the next few months then led to this development of the OpenAI Assistants API. V1 beta was released in November 2023. V2 beta was released when GPT-4 was released in April 2024. And this idea of the Assistants API was built directly on the back of these two other APIs that we saw, where Assistant is just this idea of a purpose-built AI. We might call this an agent today that can use OpenAI's models. It can access files, and it can maintain persistent threads. Of course, it can call tools by using function calling. And the idea of holding on to this thread, we already sort of visualized that before, this conversation session, this conversation thread is just a way of, keeping everything that's going on, all the reasoning and all the action results in context. And so the sort of flow of the assistant was to say, I'm going to create the assistant sort of object. I'm going to potentially use different tools. These tools are still available today. At the time, they were called code interpreter, retrieval, and function calling. Today, instead of retrieval, this is more like a file search, sort of naming it more, in more of an intuitive way. And then create a thread, add messages, run assistant on the thread. So what you have is this idea of the assistant overall, and this was kind of related to some of the stuff we saw in the GPT store being built at the time. And then the thread is user message, assistant message, there's some system message associated with it, but user assistant, user assistant, user assistant. And they said at the time, this is going to allow you to build agent-like applications. And I think there was a lot of discussion about agentic, agent-like agents. Are these things different? Well, fast forward to today, and one of the releases that they dropped on March 11th was this responses API. Let's take a look and see what they wrote about it. The responses API is our new API primitive for leveraging OpenAI's built-in tools to build agents. It combines the simplicity of chat completions with the tool use capability of the assistance API. With a single responses API call, developers will be able to solve increasingly complex tasks. Okay, using multiple tools and model turns. Now, all of that makes sense given the context we've already covered today. But what's particularly interesting, again, as I mentioned earlier, is that as model capabilities continue to evolve, piece is so interesting to me, because they go on to say in the press release in the blog here is that the new models they've been dropping, whether it's O1, obviously deep research, the multimodal stuff. Obviously, we had the entire last week of the image generation and giblification of everything, and all the stuff about copyright last week. And then also they're talking about new safety techniques, have laid the foundation for models to handle more complex, more multi-step tasks. So the complexity is sort of stacking up to new levels of abstraction here. And so all this comes together in their sort of enterprise tooling for agents piece to say, customers were like, yo, it's pretty hard to make production agents with all of your different tools. There's like a lot of work for us to do. We got to iterate on prompts. We got to develop custom orchestration logic. And you guys don't even have a good monitoring and visibility and observability setup. So they said, okay, well, how about we're going to drop the responses API, basically chat completions plus the assistance API. We're going to deprecate the assistance API. We're going to use built-in tools like the classics. And also we've covered on this channel before, computer use. Again, one of these more multimodal. I won't go deep into that today. And, and basically what we can do, and, I thought this was so interesting to see is, you can see from kind of the release here, if we can kind of start from the top in just a moment, that what you can do is you can input a simple prompt. So you are a personal book recommendation assistant. When asked to recommend books, you should use this, use that, use that. So that's sort of the system level prompt. And you get this nice output where it's thinking through, it's sort of finding the things you're looking for, it's hitting different tools. This is very similar to what you might see in an AI Makerspace demo day, the kind of application that students are building. And it's now easier than ever to build this. And so, one of the things that we're always asking students to think about is how is actually what you're building better or more useful or more valuable than what you can get out of the box from like a set of tooling from, let's say, OpenAI or directly from an O1 or deep research model. So, with that in mind, I want to just kind of zoom in on the fact that we've been talking about APIs, and now we have this SDK. And Wiz, I want to get your thoughts on this, your feedback on this. It feels like SDK is like, oh, this is legit now. This is like a proper software development kit. How should people understand the difference in these naming schemes? Is it mostly vanity here, or is there real substantial differences as far as you can tell between the APIs and the SDK?
Yeah, I mean, they're just different things, right? So like our API is something that we hit. It's something that we, we send requests to and get responses back. An SDK is a way that we can think about leveraging tools or in this case, an SDK to build software, right? So the API is something that they're going to host. They provide documentation to, we can use. The SDK is, well, it's a kit, right, for developing software using that particular API in this case. So the big difference is, API is something we can consume. SDK is something we can build with. Is the way I'd think about it.
Okay. And you played with this a little bit. And so the SDK, like, it feels more like a, the docs are better. It feels more like a proper, kind of developer toolkit.
Yeah. Feels like an SDK.
Developer kit for software development. Yeah. Like,
that's right.
Okay. I also, let's go ahead and take one of these questions in the chat, because I'm quite interested in this as well. As we, Vignesh says, are frameworks from big model players really a threat? And I would expand this, and I would say, like, if the cloud service providers drop an SDK, or as the bigger players come into this game, like, what do you think? What do you expect in terms of evolution of, like, tooling and infrastructure that is best practice today? We often recommend LangGraph, for instance. I mean, how do you think this plays out over the next couple of years? Maybe 1 year, since a couple of years is forever.
Yeah. I mean, the word threat is definitely not the word that I would use, right? I think I'm not sure who they are threatening to. Maybe LangChain is in some way not stoked, but I can't imagine that that's really true. I mean, LangChain is probably going to consume these kinds of things to produce, more richness in their ecosystem. As far as, the specificity is concerned, I mean, yes, right? This is like OpenAI's opinionated way of how to use OpenAI's, responses API through an SDK. So it's locked in, right? It is your vendor locked,
That's right.
in a way. But I don't think this is a threat. Like, it is not meant to replace all of, say, LangGraph. It's not meant to replace Llama Index. It's meant to be an opinionated way to use their API in a way that they are happy with you if you use it that way. In a year, if they continue to focus on this and make it better and more feature rich and et cetera, maybe it starts to come close to some of the OSS alternatives, right? But right now, no. And OpenAI has a history of releasing things and then not really supporting them, right? So we'll see. We'll see if this is the same or if this is different. But it feels right now like the same.
I like that. I like that perspective. And I think, like, we got to go back to, like, their customers were saying, yo, we have to write all of our own orchestration logic. Can you help us out, guys? And so I think it seems to me like it was more driven by that than anything else, just literally having to serve your customers that are paying you lots of money already. And, once everybody's kind of satisfied enough, I can't imagine, they've got so many balls in play right now. I can't imagine trying to do the product strategy for a company like that. I mean, it's just insane. So yeah, I also tend to agree. Probably not super, they're going to take over open source or something because they're finally open with some AI. Okay, cool. Let's keep it moving. Thanks, Wiz, for your insights on SDKs versus APIs. I mean, one of the things that we can also sort of focus in on with a chart like this is, the idea of what we want to cover today is, like, this is the new stuff. Everything else is kind of not new. It's kind of like this just next step in iteration, deprecating things that are no longer. It's kind of pruning the rose bush. But the Agents SDK is kind of, it's kind of new, but it's also the kind of same steady progression, the same steady drum roll of progress, right? And so of Swarm, as we started off the event with today, this experimental educational thing that came out in October. Now we're in April 2025. Now we have the Agents SDK. So let's take a closer look at the Agents SDK here and see if we can notice a few things that, sort of remind us of from whence it came. Okay, what do they say? They say simplifies orchestrating, significant improvements. What are those improvements? Well, we have agents, clear instructions, built-in tools. Sounding a lot like they're just replacing the word assistants with agents here. Handoffs. Heard of those. The handoff, intelligently transfer control between agents. And then we have, some buzzword compliance down here. Very nice. Observability and guardrails. And again, so this is really actually, if we zoom in, this is kind of the newer stuff, because even in Swarm, we already had this idea of kind of agents and handoffs. The routine itself was kind of the agent. So what are the core constructs in the Agent SDK? Well, I think you won't be surprised to see that we have agents and we have handoffs, and then we also have guardrails. So agents, literally that list of instructions with tools. Handoffs basically allow the agents to delegate to other agents, hand it off. And then guardrails, which allow us to validate the inputs to agents or to other agents. And we talked about validation on this channel just a few weeks ago. We talked about Pydantic AI and the Pydantic under the hood. Guess what they're using? Yep, you guessed it, Pydantic. So in combination with Python, these primitives are powerful enough to express complex relationship between tools and agents. Very marketing sounding. Okay, great. In addition, the SDK comes with built-in tracing that allows you to visualize and debug your agentic flows, even fine-tune your models. And then they go on to say, we have two fundamental design principles in mind. Enough features. Okay, nice. And works great out of the box. Enough, but also very few. Works right out of the box, but also can customize. Okay, sounds pretty good. And then they have some main features. An agent loop, the reasoning action pattern, can handle calling tools, sending results to the LLM, the agent, looping until the agent is done. It's Python first, okay? So we can do all sorts of things that we can do in all these other frameworks as well that are Python based, and we can write our own functions. We can do all of our own stuff that we need to. Handoffs, beat that to death basically. Run input validation checks in parallel with your agents, and this is sort of the idea of guardrails. And then the function tools, built again on the back of lots of tooling that OpenAI has put out, automatically sort of generates the schema and then does the Pydantic powered validation. And then finally tracing, which is perhaps the newest feeling vibe of all of this, is, the same kind of classic tracing, monitoring, looking at the back end of people using the app, what's going on, what can I see? That is typical with all of these types of frameworks. Now they also talk, well, we also have sort of this this fine-tuning capability within, the back end of tracing and monitoring. We have these distillation tools, presumably the sort of synthetic data generation fine-tuning. So you can sort of get the whole stack here. You can add some RAG, you can add some fine-tuning, you can do some agentic, you can modify your prompts, and then you've got your set of core patterns and for prototyping and into production. So Wiz, I'd like you to comment on a couple things. Number one, we kind of already addressed this, but how does this really compare to other frameworks? It seems to me handoffs are the sort of core constructs are kind of one-to-one. Where does it fit in when we think about maybe flexibility, customization? Often we talk about Crew AI being a little bit easier to get up and running, but maybe it's not as flexible. Where does it fit in terms of, the way we typically talk about the different framework options?
Yeah, I mean, like it occupies a similar space to like a Llama index, right? I would say right now, maybe like it kind of just fits where like Swarm used to fit, except now it's slightly better, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it isn't yet as focused on community integrations, working with everything. It's not like the RAG machine, right? Like you're gonna have to build those things yourself. There's great arguments that you should be building those things yourself. So it's not like that's not a detractor by any means. I think the people they're trying to capture is people who believe that the abstractions of frameworks are too high, that this is going to be some kind of alternative solution that is, more palatable to that section of people. But ultimately, I don't think I don't think it like has a unique space. Maybe it's closest to Pydantic, AI's agent solution, which is again this kind of like more bare bones. Just interact with the LLM really good. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's kind of like if you liked OpenAI's tooling in a similar way to sort of what we talked about with Pydantic AI, if you really liked that vibe and you're really comfortable with it, maybe that's an easy way to pick up and get started and get rolling. But at the end of the day, I mean, this is a company that has not been leading in the open source community very much, and really, to me, it seems like this new agents platform that they kind of talk about at the end of the blog, the release was, it seems like it's more focused on maybe getting people to that sort of low code, no code, quick agent sort of thing in the future than necessarily really caring about the developer experience and customization and sort of flexibility and community integrations and all the kind of things that I think we're getting more in a LangChain, LangGraph ecosystem today.
Yeah,
Okay.
Exactly. It's also like it just does exactly what it says. It doesn't do more. It doesn't do less. It's OpenAI's version of agent, right? Which might not map onto the rest of the ecosystem's idea of agent, but it certainly is and has been theirs, and it does that dutifully and faithfully. So
okay, so then on the back end, this really new piece that they're doing this monitoring and observability with, just what are your 2 cents? I know you'll walk us through in just a minute, but versus a Langsmith, versus a Logfire, versus some of these more open source friendly tools, how do you perceive the kind of vibe you're getting from this? Same, 1-to-1.
It's just OpenAI again. It's in their way that they do things. It is tracing. It shows you the little diagram. You can click on stuff and get more information. Its usefulness to me, and I believe to people that want to build sustainable, agents that exist in production, I think this will be the first piece that you outgrow to the point that you may never stop here, right? Like even myself, when we were putting together this demo, I was like, let's just use Logfire because it's just good.
Yeah.
And we used instead their traces, and I wish that it was Logfire.
Okay, excellent.
There you go.
That's a great tee up to introducing the demo here. All right, stage will be yours in just a few minutes. Let's go ahead and introduce how we're going to build deep research today. So deep research, of course, kind of came out. Everybody was fighting about their own deep research. Gemini kind of came out with an earlier version, late 2024, OpenAI, then everybody's got open deep research. And unsurprisingly, with the Agent SDK coming out, we found an OpenAI, open deep research repo that we're going to unroll for you. This is the idea that, you basically give it a simple prompt. It does all the research and comes back and gives you a nice, beautiful report, kind of report generation. And the research bot, again, their naming schemes are just so good, is like you enter the research topic, there's a planner agent, there's a search agent, there's a writer agent, bada bing, bada boom. Then we've got our report generated. So the Wiz is going to walk us through exactly what this entire application looks like. You're going to get a good feel for exactly how many lines of code this is using the Agents SDK. And then he'll show you the back end that may be the first piece that you outgrow. Wiz, handing it off to you. Hand off.
Woo! We're handing off just like the agents. Wow, so good. Thanks, Greg. Classic. Okay, so what are we doing with this whole research agent thing? With OpenAI's research agents? Well, this is it. Okay, we're just gonna make a quick deep research-esque thing. This is from their their example. I've just wrapped it in a notebook so that we can go through it top to bottom. The basic idea is very simple, right? If you're running this locally, you don't need to use, your pip installs because there's a UVenv here. We need our OpenAI API key for reasons that are hopefully obvious. We need to nest async IO because we're going to nest some async. So agents are basically like every agent's going to have a prompt, right? Which OpenAI is calling an instruction instead of a system message or developer message. Doesn't matter, right? Who cares? It's an instruction. It instructs. There you go. And then a model, which is the brain. So the model is the decision-making entity in the loop, right? Classic agent stuff. Also, of course, tools. We have tools all day, every day. We've got tools. Tools are dope. We need tools. The interesting piece is that we don't need tools for agents. This goes right back to the OG implementation of agents, right? Pre-tool. You can just ask the LM to do stuff and it will do it. It doesn't need to have tools to be an agent, though they're synonymous with tool use today. Okay, so we're going to create 3 agents. The first agent we're going to create is called a planner agent. It might surprise you that this agent plans. Okay, so we give it a prompt that asks it to plan. Classic prompt. You are a helpful research assistant. Given a query, come up with a set of web searches to perform to best answer the query. Output between 5 to 20 terms to query for. So this is the thing that's going to determine what we search, right? So this is going to do the search. I was reading something the other day that indicated all of these deep research frameworks should realistically be called broad research frameworks, right? Because they don't actually go very deep. They just search lots of things, which is a breadth strategy, not a depth strategy. I don't think we're going to be able to put the snake back in the can here, but there it goes. Okay, so we're gonna search for a bunch of different stuff. Dope. Then we're gonna create everyone's favorite. It's base model. You know what that means? It's Pydantic. We're gonna create some Pydantic kind of data models. These data models will help us understand things. They will also provide OpenAI's endpoint with the information it needs to provide us the correct kind of information back. This is classic. You've seen it before. You'll see it again. Everything's Pydantic under the hood. We have our reason. This is the reason for why the search is important. And then we have the query, which is the actual search query. And then we have a web search plan, which is a list of those reasons and queries. Then we create our agent by passing an agent, naming it, giving it its prompt, giving it its brain, and then giving it the output type. When we specify output type, we are forcing it to use a structured response, which is a specific kind of response from OpenAI. This means that we're not just getting a blank old string back. We're actually going to get some structured information back. Super helpful. Pydantic runs the world. Let's go. Okay, next we'll do a search agent. You know what it's going to do. It's going to search. So we give it a prompt that asks it to search. They use the awesome language like, it's vital you capture the essence and ignore any fluff, right? This is the kind of prompt strategy we're dealing with here. You'll also note that when we create our agent, we give it the name, we give it the prompt, we give it some tools, right? Okay, very interesting that we give it some tools, and then we give it a model settings with tool choice as required. Now, tool choice as required is a toggleable parameter, right? We can either force the model to use tools, which we're doing with tool use required here, or we can use OpenAI's model to determine whether or not we should use tools, which is an auto. Required is great because we're saying you need to do the search. You need to do a web search, right? Also, web search tool is just imported. What the heck is that thing? Well, that's from the responses API, right? It's the hosted tool. OpenAI's language here is very indicative of how they think about this, right? This is a hosted tool. It's a tool that you can interact with through an API, which is interesting because it's kind of like a tool that uses a tool, right? So we've entered toolception. It had to happen at some point. It's happened here. There you go. So we use their web search tool, which is a tool that's in their ecosystem, right? as the searching function. This is the same tool that powers like computer use and deep search, stuff like that. Okay. Then we have a writer agent. A writer agent, perhaps unsurprisingly, is just going to write the report. It's going to be powered by a better model that can have some reasoning capability. Classic. There you go. Okay. Next, we have the data model for our writer. Easy. And then we have a writer agent. Our writer agent is, same way you constructed the others, except this time we're going to use O3 Mini as the brain because we need to do reasoning. Then we have some utility classes. These utility classes, fairly straightforwardly, are going to just help us do stuff so that it looks good when we run it, right? That's all this is going to do. We have our printer. Printer is going to help print things beautifully so that it looks good and we can be happy. And then our research manager is like the orchestrator. This is the piece that's going to orchestrate the actual flow of this particular tool. This has been modified in order to work well in the notebook environment. So it's not going to be one-to-one with the example, but it will work in your notebook, which is probably a little bit more important. We have our console, we have our printer. We're going to start with a trace, right? This trace is going to be connected to OpenAI's tracing solution. We're going to be able to click a link to see the trace. Very cool. And then we're going to start research. You're going to see that we get a search plan, which we do by awaiting the planned searches, of our agent. Very cool. Then we're going to search results, which is where we perform searches. And then we're going to generate a report, which is going to be from write report. Okay, so let's see how this is all stitched together. Our final report, we just kind of, we update it, we print it out. It looks good. We're happy. We also include some follow-up questions because what's research without follow-up questions? Okay, planned searches. Guess what it's going to do? It's going to take our agent that we use to plan searches, and it's going to call it. And that's what it's going to do. Okay, very cool. Perform searches. If you guessed that it was going to search through all of the searches generated by our planned searches, agent, you'd be 100% correct. That's exactly what it's going to do. It's batched here so that we don't run into weird recursion issues in the notebook environment. And then we have our search. This search is going to run the search agent on agent. Notice that we're using this runner object. Runner is going to help us have this be a consistent flow. It's going to keep everything tied together, which is going to mean that when we see the trace, it's all in the same run, right? This is you can think of this as like the parent object of our run. And then finally, of course, we have our write report, which is going to run in a streamed fashion, the writer agent with the input so that we can see the text flow down. We don't have to just wait for it to generate. Everyone loves that. It's a classic. And then we're just going to update these things in pretty print style. Okay. We're going to start with our research query, which is going to be, what would you like to research, right? And then we can provide a query. Then we run it. You can see when we run it, we start research, we perform end searches, we search through each of those end search queries, and then we create our document. This is our final document. As you can see, this is the report. The query that we used to generate this report was talking about, why is it legal to Gimblify things? Why can we Gimbly images? Why is that allowed? I'm not a lawyer. This is not legal advice, but the report indicates that because it's fair use, basically. Follow-up questions. How might changes in copyright impact this? What specific legal frameworks could better regulate? How do ethical considerations in AI art influence public policy, industry standards? All kinds of cool stuff that I'm not worried about because, again, not a lawyer, but the idea seems to be that there's definitely more to look at, and that's cool. Okay, now, this is the agent as it runs. When we run it, we use this research manager, right? And our research manager is basically just going to take this runner and then run all of the agents. That's it. That's all it does. Let's look at now a example of that run so we can see, just to be perfectly transparent how disappointing it is. Okay, when we look at the actual trace, you know, it's classic. We have our planner agent, we got our search. We can load even more if we want. Let's load all of it. Why not, right? Okay. So we've got our planner agent, we've got our web search tool, and we've got our writer agent. You can see this took a total of many seconds. When we look at our planner agent, you can see that we get some kind of response object. We see the latency. We can see what the instruction was. We can see what the input was. Why is Ghiblifying using OpenAI GPT-4 illegal? And then we can see the response. Now remember, when we defined our response object, we wanted to see a reason and a query. And you'll notice that every one of these responses is a reason and a query. Thanks, structured outputs, right? That's the whole idea. Okay. But that's all of the information we really get, right? Like it's not a lot. It's not, it's enough, and that's dope. But it's realistically, we're used to being able to see more information than this, as well as like a dashboard look at this. Okay, searching the web, you know what's going to happen. It searches the web all of the times it needs to, right? You'll notice that you can see our batching logic occur here, where we have our 5 searches in a row. Those 5 searches, as you can see, are clustered together because we clustered them together. So because we did this in batches of 5, and we had 10 queries, you'll notice that we have 5 and 5. So we can see that logic happening. Very cool. In each of these search responses, we can see the actual search response. We can see the assistance response. We can see all of the information, what articles it looked at. Very cool. You can see it's looking up stuff that's very recent. Love it. And then finally, after we've searched the web, we have our writer agent. Our writer agent took 24 seconds. It did stuff. And you can see here's the input, right? With all of that search context just dumped on in. And then, of course, we have our assistant. And then this has our short summary, as well as the full markdown report, blobbed, and then our follow-up questions. Again, it's like we have what we need in this tracing solution, but we don't have everything we want, right? So I expect OpenAI will either work on this or partner with someone to make it more in line with what we are used to and what we used to expect. But that's the idea. That's how we use the system. It is incredibly straightforward. We simply set up agents and then we staple them together in some way. And for the purposes of tracing, we use this runner object to keep things consistent across the many agents that we may run in our flow. It's not the most complex application, obviously, but it's trivial to set up. As you saw, most of the code is just writing things that help it print beautifully. And there you go. We'll pass back to Greg. But before I do, I must ask you to hit the bell notification and subscribe. We're live every Wednesday from 1 to 2 p.m. EST. Please join us next week. And there you go. Back to Greg.
All right, there we have it. OpenAI, Agents SDK. Thanks for walking us through that, Wiz. I think we can conclude for today. Like it's pretty good. We've got some core constructs. We've got some monitoring and observability tools. Maybe those will be kind of the first things that you start to try to replace if you use this. It is kind of a competitor to LangChain, Llama Index, Pydantic, AG2, etc. I mean, these are the kinds of tools that you're going to be considering if you're just getting started today. If you're already opinionated about it and you're opinionated with an OpenAI bent, maybe you pick it up. But if you're opinionated towards something else and you're comfortable with that tool stack, maybe use that instead. I mean, at the core, these agent loops, these tool calls, these function calls, they're all accomplishing similar things. Whether it's depth or breadth search, it's really the same thing at the end of the day. We did see that sort of through line from the chat completions API into the assistant, to the function calling, and then assistance API. Now we see chat completions will continue. I mean, it's literally engaging just with the LLM in a developer context. That is sort of the lightweight thing that people will continue to have access to. And then the assistance API, I think assistance is dead. Long live agents is kind of where we get to today. That'll be deprecated in 2026. So we've got some good time for questions today. So please do throw your questions into the Slido link or throw them directly into the YouTube live chat. Let's go ahead and just piggyback right on the demo you just did. First question, can we see cost on the back end of the monitoring and observability? No cost?
You can see tokens,
but
doesn't show you a little dollar value.
That is classic. Don't worry about it. We'll send you the bill. We'll send you
300 tokens. 300 tokens, bro. Right. That obviously
will token.
That means 15 cents.
Okay, so let's go ahead and go to the Slido here. Naga asks, how do you balance autonomy and safety when enterprise agents trigger real actions across internal tools like CRMs, ticketing, enterprise resource planning systems, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, so what a great question. It's like the question of the next 5 years, probably. Realistically, like we just aren't right now, right? I don't want to be like I'm not dooming about it. I'm not saying like, oh, that's awful, but we really don't. I mean, we are pushing hard on autonomy right now. I think autonomy is the thing we're trying to solve for right now. And safety is something we're going to solve for afterwards. I mean, we see this with every adoption of technology in the last 100 years since we've had technology, right? The first thing we do is, how can we push it to its limits? And the second thing is like, oh, wait, I mean, this deleted our database and that was really bad, right? Oh. We live in the modern world, though, where like these actions are usually, they just cost cash, right? I mean, we back everything up. We have, we can sandbox, at least a little bit effectively. We have permissions. And so like the potential for catastrophic failure, is already very low since we have humans that operate autonomously in the systems. And so long as we treat agents like humans, right? We're already kind of set up for them. But again, we're just not worrying about it. We're just treating them like a junior dev. We're giving them junior dev permissions, and we're saying, let her rip, in the extent of your scope.
Yeah. Right. I mean, because the answer is that we put humans in the loop right now, and it's like that's what we've been talking about the last few years, is like state machines versus full autonomy, where you can sort of pop out and be like, I think we need higher level permissions here, which is sort of the fundamental issue everywhere, is like, what's the permission level? When does it become human? And when does it stay AI? And it's like, I mean, to solve it generally across all internal tools, I think is impossible. It's like, what kind of query do you actually need to have answered on a scale that would indicate autonomy is a cost-effective solution given the risk? It's like, what are those questions exactly? And how many times a day are humans answering them today? That's why we see like call centers and other places like, probably low risk, high reward. Okay. Is the OpenAI Agent SDK a walled garden? I can only use OpenAI models?
I believe the answer to that question is probably no. I'll double check right this moment. We'll do a live double check.
That's a great question. I like that.
But I believe that I just need to remember if I'm remembering correctly, because I believe I saw that you can use it with anything.
You gotta go deep.
Okay, so you can't. So the answer is yes. Okay, but I don't think like the support is specific. But of course, yes, you can. Yes. Okay, here we go. Notably, our SDK is compatible with any model providers that support the OpenAI chat completions API format. So if you're using models that support OpenAI, which, spoiler alert, you are, unless you use Anthropic, then you have to use a wrapper. Yes, this will work with those. So the beautiful thing is that they don't need to build official support because they are the ones who set the standard for the OpenAI API spec that everyone uses. Yeah. So, you know, because they were first and they did a great job, yes, you can use whatever model you want so long as it conforms to the spec that they set. Which again is the standard. So look at that little full circle moment for OpenAI.
Well, full circle actually. So speaking of standards, okay, I want to just go ahead and set this up. So the chat completion system user assistant sort of setup. Okay, it's become now I think it's going to be developer user assistant, but whatever. Okay, so if people use it, okay, fine, they can leverage it. So let's define the word protocol here. Protocol is a set of rules or conventions that govern a specific process, communication, or behavior. Everybody wants to know Wiz. So it seems like chat completions is a bit of a protocol for hitting an API endpoint for an LLM. And so then how does the OpenAI SDK complement and integrate with everybody's favorite buzzword of the day? Mitul's talking about it in the chat. Anonymous talks about it. MCP, baby. Why didn't we talk about MCP today? Oh my God. Is this MCP compliant? Is that a word we can use now?
It literally is, dude. I mean, like the answer to your question is yes. You can use it with MCP. I'll link it in the thing. I'll link it in the chat. You know that boom, MCP file system example uses the file system MCP server. Yes,
got it.
It's in buzzword compliance. You best believe.
Right. And by the way, next week, right here at this time, MCP, we're covering it. Okay, so RSVP for that one right now. Okay, final question. How easy is it to use the functionality with other OpenAI compatible LLMs? I think we already kind of covered this. What about tool called structured outputs and traceabilities? I think sort of, can I use Logfire? Can I use other things?
Yes. So it has to be OpenAI API compatible, chat completion specifically, and the support for tool calling is going to be provider specific. The structured outputs is going to be provider specific. The traceability is the thing that they have, and in my opinion, obviously have the most out of the box support with. It works with like Logfire, Agent Ops, Brain Trust, Scorecard, Keywords AI. It works with these because their tracing solution is bad. And so they allow you to integrate with a number of great tracing providers, which are not bad. And that's great. So I have to say that this is a great example of someone building a product that understands a pain point their users have, which is tracing, observability, right? Or visibility, monitoring, whatever of the words you want to use. Not really observability yet, but and so they've given you a number of great opportunities to plug that hole or shorten that gap, right? Out of the box, they're going to integrate with these providers, which is great. Again, this is because we've kind of landed on some standards in the ecosystem by now, which is why they have an SDK instead of like a experimental library like Swarm. Since things are kind of standardizing, this kind of tool makes more sense right now than it did at the same time last year. But yes, it integrates with a lot of different visibility platforms.
And finally, I just want to get real specific about Mitul's question right here.
Okay. Yeah.
Just back to MCP for just a moment.
Of course.
Okay. Can I use MCP servers as tools in the OpenAI Agent SDK?
I mean, I would have to assume yes. Let me look at the specific example for you, Mitul. Only for you.
Only for you. Yeah. Anything for you, Mitul. Okay. All right. So we will follow up.
The answer is that they're used as MCP servers. They have their own. They're not called tools. They're called MCP servers. Okay. So the answer is yes, through their MCP server integration.
That's right. Okay. All right. So the integrations are becoming more and more wild all the time. Awesome. Agents SDK, new chapter of production level enterprise grade AI system. Let's go. Maybe you pick it up, maybe you don't. Wiz, thanks for dropping the knowledge today and walking us through the OpenAI application. All right, guys, thanks for joining us for today's event on enterprise agents with OpenAI and the Agents SDK. We hope you found it useful. And next week, we will be covering model context protocol. So join us for that one. It should be a banger, hopefully. We're really excited to put this one together. There's a lot of stuff happening, and I hope we can do it justice next week. If you're not part of the Discord community, please jump in, join us today, start building, shipping, and sharing. If you're coming from a data science or software engineering background and you're looking to really break into AI, start building, shipping, and sharing today, we've outlined some really easy to follow, self-paced, free learning paths, depending on your background, directly on AI Makerspace.io. That'll help you take where you are to where you want to be in 2025. Check those out. Let us know what you think, because it's a new thing we're trying, and we hope that you find it useful. We've just kicked off the AI Engineering Bootcamp Cohort 6 last night. No kidding. This summer, Cohort 7 will kick off on June 24th. We've really dialed in the core and supplemental curriculum here to create as much value as possible for startup operators and aspiring founders, as well as enterprise engineers and leaders, and even government employees looking to get after it. If you want to get started even thinking about it, go ahead and just start building, shipping, and sharing by taking the AI Engineering Bootcamp Challenge today. The week before the next cohort, our team will also be in Toronto at the Toronto Machine Learning Summit, June 16th to 18th. So join us there live. Come say hi, and we'll buy you a drink or a coffee. It'd be really cool to meet some of you guys in person. And then if you want to tinker on your own with any of the agentic frameworks we talked about today, like LangGraph or Llama Index, Pydantic AI, AG2, even more, or even some of the ops stuff that Wiz just talked about, you can find all the concepts and code we've ever covered on YouTube, live, directly in the awesome AIM index. Thanks again for joining us today. As always, until next time, keep building, shipping, and sharing, and we'll do the same. See you next week, everybody. Have a good one. Bye.